let's give it a couple minutes. So, yeah. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you all hear me? Good Shabbos and welcome. This is the first time I've led a service in over 2 years. So because Israel is a spiritual democracy, if I screw up, it's incumbent upon you to correct me. Okay? Thank you. I've been shut in pretty much for 2 years. I haven't been able to come to services even when we had in-person services for several reasons. And I've had to rely on the YouTube services, and they've been a godsend to me. It's kept me involved in the synagogue and kept me involved in the religion, and it's been very helpful. I know that there are people who are shut in now and can't come, and it will always be that way. And I hope that we will continue to do live streaming of the services. I think it's important. My personal favorite was the recent Purim service, and I got a lot of joy from the participants because they were having so much fun. And it was good for me because I was pretty down in the dumps that particular night. And my image of Bill Alexander as Queen Esther is an image that's tattooed on my brain. I don't think it's indelible. I'll never forget it, and I wish I could. So anyway, I'm very grateful for that. And so the powers that be, whoever they are, keep streaming these services because they're good, they're valuable. So having said that, let's begin with Hine Matovu Manayim. If you need to look at the words, they're on page 10, and it goes like this. Ahim gam yachad, hine matov, shevet ahim gam yachad, hine matov, shevet ahim gam yachad, hine matov manayim, shevet ahim gam yachad. Hine matuv manayim, Shevet ahim gam yachad. Shevet ahim gam yachad. We will begin our service with the lighting of the candles. The blessings are on page 2. And anyone who would like to, please come up and let's light the candles. And because no one ever volunteers, I know this, Dawn, would you come light the candles, please, and say the blessing? Okay.
Will you say the blessing if we come up?
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll come up.
We'll all say it. B'mitzvotov b'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat. Amen. Okay. We'll continue the service with the Kiddush on page 5 and ask you to please stand and join me. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pari hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kadsho v'achava v'ratzon hinhilanu zikaron l'maaseh b'reishit yom tehillah l'mikrei kodesh zecher l'tzias Mitzrayim kivanu v'halta danu kidashta mikol hamim v'shabbat kadshecha v'yachava uvratzon hinhaltanu Baruch atah Adonai mikadesh ha-Shabbat. Amen. Please be seated. L'chaim. With a simcha. We continue on page. I'm going to do something different tonight. I'm going to skip a few of the introductory prayers and songs, and they're not required in a Shabbat service. We have a lot of leeway. We'll do all the required prayers, but I want to go now to page 20, L'cha Dodi. And I think you all know we'll sing the first 2 verses, and then we'll rise and face the door and sing the last verse. L'cha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nikabala. L'cha Dodi likrat kala, b'nei Shabbat nikabala. Shamur v'zakur b'dibur echad, Ishmi'onu el muchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shem u'tifaras v'liticha lecha. Lecha davdi lekrat kala, Panei Shabbat nikabala, lechi Panei Shabbat nikabala, li Dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nikabala, likrat dodi likrat bala, B'nei Shabbat nikabala. Likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nikabala. Oiva shalom aterech bala, Gam b'simcha uv'sachala, To'eth emunei am tzigula, Bo'ikala, Bo'ikala. Shabbat nikabala, Dodi, B'nei Shabbat nikabala. Please be seated, and we'll continue our service on page 24. With the singing of Shalom Aleichem. Lechem Malachei HaShoresh, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malachei HaMlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Ohem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlochim, Kadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu ni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seitzem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei HaMlochim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Many years ago, I was president of Ner Shalom at a time when we had a very small membership and no budget at all. And I went to a conference with all the presidents of the conservative temples all over the West. And we had a special meeting of the presidents to discuss maintenance of temples. And we went around the room and everybody said, "What's your budget?" And they were saying 400,000, 300,000. And I said, $21.95. And they said, "For what?" And I said, "Well, we bought a little push broom, and it was $21.95. Well, that's how I feel having a pianist accompany me. I'm just not used to this. This is not my, I'm down at the $21.95 level pushing the broom, and we've got a class act here, so thank you." That's what I thought of. Let's continue on page 26 with the Hatzi Kaddish. And when I get to the Hatzi Kaddish, I'm really torn because the way I learned it was Yit Gadal. Well, you know Yit Gadal. I learned it Yisgadal. Okay, so I'm struggling. If I screw this up a little bit, I go Yis or Yit. Bear with me. Yisgadal ve'yiskada shamei rabbo v'yalma divrach irusei v'yamelich malchusei v'chayechon uv'yomechon uv'hayedechol beit Yisrael bahagala uv'zman kariv v'yamaru amen. Yishmei Rabba Mevarach Leolam leomea Yisborach Yisborach v'yishtabach v'yispawar v'yisraman v'yisnaseh v'yishadar v'yisaleh v'yisol shamei dekudasha b'richu le'elam en kol berchasa v'shirasa tush b'chasa v'nehemasa dahamiran b'yama v'yamaru. Amen. We continue on page 28 with the Baruch Hu, and please rise. Baruch Hu es Adonai Hamavorach. Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Boed. Continue on page 30. Baruch Adonai Eloheinu Melech. Am I doing this right? No. Let's read together in the English. Blessed are you, God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tsevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on evening. Baruch atah Adonai ha'ma'ariv aravim. Please be seated, and we'll continue together on page 32 in the English. Everlasting love you offered together. Everlasting love you offered your people Israel by teaching us Torah and mitzvot, laws and precepts. Therefore, Adonai our God, when we lie down and when we rise up, we will meditate on your laws and your commandments. We will rejoice in your Torah forever. Day and night we will reflect on them, for they are our life, and doing them lengthens our days. Never remove your love from us. Praise to you, Adonai, who loves your people Israel. Baruch atah Adonai, Ohav Amo Yisrael. We continue with the Shema on page 34, and it's customary to say the Shema in the position you find yourself when we get there in the service. So I set it up so we'd be seated. Okay. If we had been standing before the Shema, we'd have to continue standing. Say, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem, Kavod Malchuto, Adonai Echad. We usually do the Ve'ahavta in Hebrew, but tonight I'd like to do it in English. If we had a Torah school person here, we'd have them up here doing it in Hebrew, but it sometimes pays to do it in English so we know what we're saying. So let's read together. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God, Adonai Elohechem Emet. And we'll continue on page 40 with Mikamocha. I think I'd like to do it together, first in Hebrew and then responsively in English. So together in Hebrew, yeah. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nehedar ba'deshet. No ra tehila o sefele, no ra tehila o sefele. And together, who is like you, O God, among the gods that are worshipped? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, awesome in splendor, working wonders? Your children witnessed your sovereignty, the sea splitting before Moses and Miriam. This is our God, they cried. Adonai will reign forever and ever. Thus it is said, Adonai redeemed Jacob from a hand stronger than his own. Praised are you, Adonai, for redeeming Israel. Baruch atah Adonai Goal Yisrael. We'll continue on page 44 with Vishamru, and would you please stand? Shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, Lasod et ha-Shabbat, l'doratam barit olam. Shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, Lasod et ha-Shabbat, l'doratam barit olam. Read the olam, b'nei olam, ahili olam, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, Lasod et ha-Shabbat, l'doratam barit olam. Ki sheshes yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz, v'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, Lasod et ha-Shabbat, l'doratam barit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash, Shabbat v'yinafash. Shamaru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, Lasod et ha-Shabbat, l'doratam barit olam. And remain standing. Turn to page 46, please, and we'll begin the Amidah. Adonai siftav tefillah ufi yagid datecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praises. We come now to the formal Amidah. And this is a silent prayer. All major serious religions have time in their service for meditation, for silent prayer. And I'm not saying Judaism was the first, but certainly it was the first in the West. So you may pray this in English or in Hebrew or just silently, but basically the idea is this. Whatever you do, be sure to take a moment to take a look at how you behaved this last week. Were you polite? Were you kind? Were you compassionate? Were you considerate? How did you behave? And if you didn't like something that you did, what are you going to do about it? Can you fix it next week? That's the kind of stuff that we should be thinking about. How do we become better people? And use this time for that. Now, I want to just give you a little bit of trivia, and I'll let you go ahead and sit down for a second. I was reading this, and it struck me, if you read the Hebrew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down, the fourth word in is Ha'el Hagadol, and it sounds like this. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon. And you find that also in the blessings after the Haftorah. It's exactly the same thing. Well, the interesting thing is, and I've said this before, but it's been a long time. You all know who Irving Berlin is, okay? His name was Isidore Baleen. He was born in 1888 in Russia, and he became a great American songwriter. So one of the songs he wrote was God Bless America, okay? Well, he knew the music from the synagogue. So if you think about it, here's what happened. In God Bless America, we have from the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans white with foam. Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanara, El Elyon, white with foam. El Elyon. That's where it came from. So I have this vision. It's really perverted, but I have this vision of the Proud Boys opening their meeting with a patriotic song and singing Jewish prayers. I love it. I just love it. Okay. I think let's do this. Let's read this in English, just the first paragraph. It starts, Blessed art thou, are you, Adonai our God, God of our fathers and mothers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God of Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, the great, mighty, and awesome God, transcendent God, who bestows loving kindness, creates everything out of love, remembers the love of our fathers and mothers, and brings redemption to their children's children for the sake of thy divine name. Now this prayer, now we can begin, and would you stand, please, and however you choose to say this prayer, when you get to page 62, feel free to be seated. And we have a tradition in Judaism that we don't leave anyone standing alone. So if you find yourself at the very end and you see someone else standing, wait until they are finished, and then we sit down together. Okay? So would you stand, please, and now it's time for the Amidah. include the Amidah on page 62. In the center of the page is a prayer in English, which I used to call the lawyer's prayer. I like the old translation better. It says, guard my speech from evil and my lips from speaking guile, is the way it used to be. But let us read together that paragraph. My God, guard my speech from evil and my lips from deception. Before those who slander me, I will hold my tongue. I will practice humility. Open thou my heart to your Torah, that I may pursue your mitzvot. As for all who think evil of me, cancel their designs and frustrate their schemes. Act for your own sake, for the sake of your power, for the sake of your holiness, for the sake of your Torah, so that your loved ones may be rescued, saved with your power, and answer me. And let's continue. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, Adonai, my rock and my redeemer. And now, it's time for the sermon. And usually, I like to get a theme and a title and then make an outline and then prepare the sermon. This time I wrote the sermon before I had a title because it was so, well, you'll see. The title, I have a title. How to Get Inspiration from a Seemingly Meaningless Torah Portion. That's it. I think that when we come to temple, I really feel this way, that it should be a refuge, a place where we can forget our troubles, enjoy the company of our friends and fellow congregants, laugh a little bit, maybe cry a little, and when it's over, we should have learned something. And we should be glad that we were here, and we should come away feeling that it was worth our time. There are a number of topics that I would have liked to have discussed with you tonight, because each of them, I think, is of great importance to us as Jews, but each of them is a sermon unto themselves. They include the war in Ukraine, the worldwide rise of anti-Semitism, the American culture war, and the appointment of Ketanji Jackson Brown today to the Supreme Court. These are all things I want to talk about. I can't, so I'm just going to say a couple of words. Ukraine. My mother's family came from Kiev in Russian, Kiev in Ukraine, and they got out in the chaos of the Russian Revolution in 1914, 1915, something like that. But everyone in their family didn't get out. Aunts, cousins, uncles, they didn't get out. And when the Nazis invaded Ukraine in 1941, there were 150,000 Jews in Kiev. On September 29th and September 30th, 1941, the Nazis machine-gunned, in a two-day period, 33,771 Jews. I'm going to do that again. 33,771 in 2 days. And they did it on the side of a great ravine in Kiev named Babi Yar in Russian. And so when they machine-gunned all these people, the bodies were disposed of by pushing them into the ravine. And my mind cannot comprehend this. And we know that the number is exact because the Nazis kept meticulous records. They were very good record keepers. So you have to ask yourself, did they take coffee breaks? Did they work 8 to 5? What kind of a mind does it take to commit atrocities such as this? And we're seeing it again, of course, in Ukraine. Well, at Babi Yar, it's estimated that 150,000 people died, and they weren't all Jews. They were the people the Nazis didn't like. They were communists. They were homosexuals. They were gypsies. They were Catholic clergy that wouldn't give in to the Nazis. But there were a lot of Jews. And when the war ended in 1945, the Soviet Union did nothing to Babi Yar. It simply remained a covered mass grave. And it stayed that way for 47 years until Ukraine gained its independence. And the first thing they did was they turned it, you're going to have to work with me on this. They turned it into a cemetery and a beautiful Holocaust memorial. 3 weeks ago, Putin mortared Babi Yar. He destroyed the cemetery, he destroyed the the graveyard and the Holocaust memorial. And now he's doing it in other places in Ukraine. He's just attacking all the Holocaust memorials. So, since I'm not going to talk about Ukraine, I'm going to stop with that one right now. Let's talk about anti-Semitism for a second. Just a few comments. It is a virus. Every serious scholar, every serious student of anti-Semitism knows that it's a virus. It comes and it goes. And there are times in history when the Jews are spared the wrath of the anti-Semitic world, and there are times when we're not. Well, right now, anti-Semitism is rising everywhere, and in the United States, quite obviously. I don't have to tell you, and we're not going to go into details, but the point is that we've survived this. We have survived. You don't see anti-Philistines or anti-Hittites because they don't exist. The Jews exist. We survived this. And how did we do it? Well, there's an old story, and perhaps you've heard it. The PA system comes on and it says, "Attention, attention, the world as we know it is about to be destroyed." Have you heard this? No. Okay. Within 3 days, the world is going to be completely underwater. And so the Catholic priest calls his flock together, and he brings them together, and he says, "The world as we know it is going to be destroyed in 3 days. Come forward and get your last rites." The Protestant minister takes his flock up to the top of the mountain. He says, "The world as we know it is going to be destroyed in 3 days. Come forward and take Jesus as your Savior." The rabbi calls her congregation together, and she says to them, "I have good news and bad news. The bad news is the world as we know it is going to be completely underwater in 3 days. The good news is we have 3 days to learn to live underwater." Think about that. Okay. A very good friend of mine, a Lutheran minister, gave me a book titled Christian Anti-Semitism, A History of Hate. And it was written by a very prominent Episcopalian bishop, I think, who ended up being the founder and chair of the Department of Religious Studies at the University of British Columbia. Very well-renowned fellow. And his book traces the origins of anti-Semitism from the Gospels to modern time. And his thesis is that it's the blaming of the Jews for the death of Christ that is the central reason why anti-Semitism exists. And his second is the Gospels lied. It's not true. He proved to me, a lawyer, that it was impossible for the Jews to have killed Christ in the procedural manner in which it's described in the Gospels. And by the way, there's 4 Gospels that talk about this, and 2 of them agree, and the other 2 are different from the first 2. So you can take your pick, but the general idea is the Jews killed Jesus. And then he goes on and explains why the Jews were blamed for killing Jesus, and the answer is simple. The Gospels were written almost 100 years after the death of Christ, which was, depending on how you count, 3 or 4 generations after the death of Christ, because life expectancy wasn't very long in those days. So if you have an oral history, it's possible that things get screwed up. But that isn't really the reason. The reason is that Rome still occupied Judea at the time the Gospels were written. And if the authors of the Gospels had said, Rome killed Jesus, there would have been repercussions. But by saying the Jews killed Jesus, piece of cake. And at the time, it was no big deal because Christianity was this big. Well, here we are. And I once walked across a covered bridge in Austria with Mark Jan, and we saw beautiful, beautiful artwork inside the bridge, and it was all Catholic religious symbols, which my wife was Catholic, and she recognized them and explained them to me. And we got to the end of the bridge, and I looked out, and there we were in the Alps, and it was absolutely gorgeous. And I couldn't figure out how people who live in such a beautiful place and have such a wealthy country could be so callous, could do this. And the answer is, historically, that Western Europe and Christian Europe had a 2,000-year history of hating the Jews. There's a book out by Simon Wiesenthal. It's called Every Day a Day of Remembrance. And in it, he takes any day of the calendar year, pick a day, September 23rd, and he'll list all the atrocities that were committed against Jews on September 23rd anywhere in the world. Okay? And there's no day that is exempt, every day. Okay? 1,000 were burned at the stake because the town thought they were guilty of creating the Black Plague. You know, you name it. Anything that went wrong in medieval Europe, the Jews were the victims. And they were the culprits and they were the victims. So when it came time to exterminate the Jews, it wasn't a big leap intellectually or emotionally or theologically because Christian Europe was ready for it. We were the bad guys. Well, he explains all this in the book. It's really a wonderful thing. I want to really go into it. I would like to tell you why he proved and how he proved that the Jews could not have killed Jesus, but I'm only touching on it. It's a topic that I wanted to discuss, so I'm not going to discuss it. Okay, so that's that. We talk about the culture war, okay, and by the way, that doesn't mean we'll never talk about it. It means tonight. Okay, when it comes to the culture war, it's taken us back about 100 some years. It took me back to the Scopes trial, the monkey trial in Tennessee. It's what we're witnessing now. Those were the anti-evolution laws, for those of you who don't know. Tennessee prohibited teaching evolution in the schools. Okay, and a science teacher named Scopes happened to do it. He was arrested. It was a criminal case. Became a cause célèbre, and he was convicted. But by the time he was convicted, the anti-evolutionists looked so bad that his fine was something like $10. And that was the end of the problem in Tennessee. Well, here we are again. And what we've got now, at that time, let's go back 100 years. Segregation was the law of the land. Jews, although we were white, were second-class citizens. We were barred from many schools, colleges, universities, many professions, neighborhoods, country clubs, you name it, on and on and on. Now we've progressed 100 years, and now we have what? We're banning books. We're intimidating school boards to make them not teach science, really. That's what it's all about. We're restricting curriculums. We're driving, with the culture war, we're driving the suppression of legislation that's taking away the right to vote to an awful lot of people. They're jeopardizing free and fair elections by intimidating election officials. So the culture war is very simple. It's going to see the reversal of Roe versus Wade. It's already declared war against and has legislated against the LGBT community. They're, if you happen to be transgender, I'm going to give you some free advice. Don't go to Florida. You know, and it's the same throughout many, many places. So the proponents of the culture war are advocates of free speech, but only for themselves and only if you agree with them. If you disagree with them, then you're a traitor. You know, and that's the level that we're dealing with. And it affects the Jews. It's of great concern and great significance, and it deserves our time and attention, but I'm not going to do it tonight. Okay. I want to talk for a moment about Ketanji Jackson Brown. This is a historic moment, the appointment of a black woman to the Supreme Court. As a Jew and a lawyer, I'm very happy. I'm very happy. It's historic. It can only make the court better because now it's a real voice for minorities. Clarence Thomas is black, but he doesn't know it. You know, that's the problem with Clarence Thomas. So now we have a black on the court who can articulate and really articulate to the other justices what it means to be a minority in America. And that's a good thing. Even people who have a fixed frame of mind on many issues might just be willing to change their mind if anyone ever presented an alternate point of view. But it's been a cocoon up to now, by and large, and now it's not. So I'm very happy about that. But I decided early on I'm not going to talk about any of those topics tonight. Rather, I looked to the Torah portion this week for inspiration, and boy, was it tough. Last week the portion was about leprosy, and this week it continues, only they're discussing the purification of lepers. So listen to this from Leviticus 14, chapters 13 through 14. It's just 2 sentences. And he shall kill the he-lamb in the place where they killed the sin offering and the burnt offering in the place of the sanctuary. For as the sin offering is the priest's, so is the guilt offering. It is the most holy. And the priest shall take of the blood of the guilt offering, and the priest shall put it on the tip of the right ear of him who is to be cleansed, and upon the thumb of his right hand, and upon the great toe of his right foot. That was the good part. This is terrible. That's just 2 verses. There are 90 verses that I read in this Torah portion, and it was brutal. So I struggled, and I struggled, and I struggled. And the only thing that I understood immediately were the 2 introductory verses where they're talking about how do you start the process of cleansing the leper. And what happens is a leper who is to be cleansed is brought to the priest. How does it work? Let me quote it. On the day of his cleansing, a leper who is to be cleansed is to be brought unto the priest. And if the priest sees that the person is free of leprosy and has been cured, then that triggers all the rituals that are required in order to complete the cleansing. Well, the problem is that people were bringing lepers to the priest at 2 o'clock in the morning. And according to the Torah, or 3 o'clock, or 6 o'clock in the morning, all hours of the day and night. And the priests didn't like this. Their sleep was interrupted. So what they did is I don't know how to say it, put it in modern terms, they got themselves a labor lawyer to negotiate hours and working conditions. And the labor lawyer turned out to be the rabbis. And so the rabbis interpreted this as saying, well, if a leper is to be brought on the day of his cleansing, that means daytime. So you people, if you come after 5 o'clock, this office is closed. Come back tomorrow morning. And that's exactly what happened. The only reason I know this is because Rabbi Hertz, in his commentary, the Chumash, which we have here, made this point. He said, this is how it works. This is politics. This is economics. This is the Torah. Okay? Well, that didn't help a lot. The ritual sacrifices have long since disappeared, and I kept asking myself, why is this Torah portion important? What can this possibly mean? How can I not understand this? I couldn't. And then I finally figured it out. Here it is. Judaism deals with the realities of life. Every aspect of life is regulated one way or another. Everything. And I like that. It's down to the minutia. In this week's Torah portion, there's even legislation regarding menstruation and penal discharges. What kind of religion worries about this, and why? And why is it important? And the answer is Judaism worries about it, and it's important because somebody, maybe God, probably, took a long, hard look at how people were behaving and wrote legislation that governed the things that we do. They governed our behavior, it governed our bodily functions, it governed the way we treat our bodies. There's nothing that isn't legislated in one way or another in the Torah. And this stuff is real. Now, we're Reform or conservative Jews, and we're not required religiously to follow the Torah literally. When I was young, my brother and I, we went to a temple where the rabbi was a very prominent conservative rabbi, Mordecai Waxman, probably one of the best-known rabbis in the conservative movement in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And Rabbi Waxman wrote a book. The book was called Tradition and Change. And he argued that conservative Judaism, and by extension Reform Judaism, really has the best of both worlds because we learn the traditions. We learn about the sin offering and the guilt offering and the burnt offering, and then we try to figure out how can we make this stuff relevant to our daily lives as modern Americans. And that's the difference between orthodoxy and conservative and reform. We have to take this and figure out how does it make us better. Well, it does. It isn't important that we follow the rituals to cleanse a leper. It doesn't matter at all. But it is important that we acknowledge the disease, the victims of which were reviled throughout history. It didn't matter what culture you're talking about. If you've been to Hawaii, the whole island of Molokai was a leper colony. You know, the lepers were the lowest class of human beings on earth in every environment, in every culture, in every country. But in Judaism, we recognize the dignity of the leper. Sorry, I'm losing it. And we provide a mechanism for the leper to regain entrance into society. There's nobody else on earth who worries about these things. And why is it important? Because the lowest person, the poorest person, the most despised person is honored in Judaism because it's a person. You know. And so, the reason that the Torah's legislation over our daily lives is so important, I don't know how to say this. By extension, and let me get off the lepers for a minute, I am very, very familiar with the laws governing death, dying, burial, and mourning. Very familiar. And I will tell you this. When my dad died, I was 12 years old, and I went to Daily Minyan at Temple in New York, and it was possible. It was a 2,000-person temple, and we had a Daily Minyan. It was very easy to do it. We sat Shiva for the time period. It was 7 days, 9, 7? I can't remember. Whatever the number of days, we did it. And we went to Daily Minyan, and we mourned. I couldn't do that when Jan died. My wife Jan died last year, just because we don't have a Daily Minyan. So it's impossible to do that. And I couldn't sit Shiva with the community because we're in the middle of a pandemic. But I did have the benefit of one night of Zoom for Shiva. And it was good. It was wonderful. Thank you. I took great comfort as a mourner in the words of the Torah and of our sages, and they were no strangers to death. It was, my loss to me was, and it still is, it was crushing and overwhelming. But I found much comfort in the Jewish scriptures, the Torah, the commentaries, because it put death in perspective. I wasn't the only person in the history of the world who lost a spouse. You know, all of us will. If we're married, somebody's going to lose a spouse. You're either the survivor or the deceased. So figure it out. Okay? And the Jews figured it out, and we've got this down to a science. And if I found out that by following the laws of mourning, it controlled my behavior during the 1 year period after Jan's death. If somebody would say, hey, come to a party, and I'd say, no, I'm sorry, I can't, I'm prohibited. And it was such a comfort to be prohibited. It made it really easy to say no. And it was the right thing to do. Whoever wrote the laws of mourning, and I guess it was God, knew what he was talking about. Because they gave us a 1 year period to be mourners. And during that 1 year period, I could watch the stages of grief, starting at below ground, below sea level, and climbing to the top. Not to the top of the mountain, but to the top of wherever I was climbing, the little foothill. Okay, there's a long way to go. But it was Judaism that made it easier. And it was because they legislated everything. You will sit here, you'll turn to the right, you'll turn to the left. And so you don't have to think about it. Just follow the rules. And the rules are people-based. It's like they observed how people behave and how long is it going to take for you to be able to function. How much support do you need from the community? And so they legislated it. And what we've got here in this Torah, even with the most inane and irrelevant portions, if we think about it, it's going to give us a lot of comfort. Judaism doesn't deal with fiction and with idealism. It deals with reality. And it teaches us how to live our lives. And because we're Reformed, we can be cafeteria Jews. We can pick and choose what we want. And there's a lot of merit to that, because there are some things that have no relevance to me at all, and yet it's legislated, and I don't want to do it. But there are other things that make perfect sense in this modern world, and there it is. It's there. So you can edit out the stuff that doesn't help you and grab the stuff that supports you, and thank God for the stuff that supports us. The big lesson that I learned from this week's Torah portion is that when we feel like we're a rudderless ship going in circles, Judaism can give us the needed direction to navigate the waters of life and death. And for me, I am most grateful to have received this gift of Judaism, a gift from God. And let me say, with you, amen. We'll continue our service on page 253. This is the Mishiberach. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, bless these members of our community. Robin Cohn, David Hayes, Diana Heller, Rob Hirsch, Panina Kolakant, Barbara Kurtzman, Kit Levine, Sharon Maslow, Rick Moss, Dave Podlasky, Margaret Schmidt, Elliot Schwartz, Cheryl Shellub, John Sitters, Melanie Spielman, and John Wheaton. And now give you an opportunity to call out names of people you want to be remembered. And what I'll do is what we always do. We'll go around the room like this. We'll start with you. You can call out a name or not. More than one. Anyone? Don? Okay, John? Diana? Okay. Leslie? Okay. 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 Nancy? Okay. And I have one, Jim Cannell. Now here's where that spiritual democracy stuff becomes important, because I have a mental block when it comes to Mishiberach. I'm going to try it, and if I screw it up, somebody raise their hand and stop me. Mishiberach. Is that the way it starts? Oh, gosh. I'm sorry? Play. Okay. Yeah. Mishiberach avotenu mikur habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mishiberach imotenu Makur habracha, lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen. Thank you. I would like to deviate from the norm a little bit tonight and sing Hatikva, because it means hope, and we need it. So if you will join me on page 374, and please rise. Yeah. Oh, old Balevo Panimo, Nefesh Yehudi Omia, Rofate Mizra Kadimo, Ayin Zion Sophia. Od lo advatik vatenu ha liotam hoshi beartsenu Eretz Sion Yerushalayim Shi beartsenu Eretz Sion Yerushalayim. Now, I'd like to call on the president, please be seated. I'd like to call on President Jackie Ramsdell, but I don't see her. So is there anyone designated to give announcements? Okay. I would like to wish happy birthday to everyone who has a birthday this week, and happy anniversary to all those who have anniversaries. And if you happen to get a dog from the pound, congratulations. I'm sorry? I can't understand a word you're saying. Sorry.
Birthdays and anniversaries are at the bottom of the yard site list, I think. The yard site.
Oh, you might be right. Okay.
There's no service next Friday night, regardless. At 15.
Okay.
So could you announce that for the world?
I don't know if everybody could hear you.
Right, no, you should repeat it.
I didn't hear her. That's why I don't think everybody heard. So,
No service next Friday,
okay.
period.
There is no service next Friday.
And why?
It's passe. So I'd like to announce that next Friday night, there will not be a service here at the synagogue or live streaming because it's the first night of Passover, and so there is no service. It'll be in the email newsletter, but since we are live streaming tonight and we have this service, I'll make the announcement. However, I'd also like to announce that there will be members of the ritual committee that will be saying Kaddish for all of those that have a yort site. So yort sites will be said, and a memorial candle will be lit.
Thank you. Okay. We will continue our... Any more announcements? No. We'll continue our service on page 282 with the Aleinu, and I'll ask you please to stand. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, l'ateit gudula יוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הרצון, לא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה. לא שם חלקנו כהם, והור עלינו ככל המונה. אנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים מודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. And we'll continue on 284. Shahunot Shamayim Eretz Usho Yakaro B'Shamayim Mimal Ushkinatuzo Begahe Meheromim Eloheinu Enod Mizratenu Efezulato Kakahatu Batorato Yadato Hayom Vahashivata El Levavecha Adonai Hu Elohim B'Shamayim Bimal Ol Hachad Einod. And we continue on 287. V'nemar v'hoya Adonai L'melech al kol haaretz Bayom hahu Yeh Adonai echad Ushemo echad. Okay. Please be seated.
There are a couple more announcements that should be made.
Sure. Do you want this?
I'll just project, because I have a cold, and I'm not COVID, it's just cold. This works?
Yeah, it's on.
Thank you, Kira. So we're dark April 15th, but the following Friday night, Cantor Shira Fox will be here. She'll be here on Saturday morning, the following morning, the 23rd, for a Torah service at 9:30. And there'll be an adult discussion on Havdalah at 4:30, Saturday the 23rd. There's religious school the 24th. And then the following Wednesday is Yom HaShoah here. It will be a beautiful service. I urge you all to come. A lot of feeling and work has been put into its development. So, yeah, and then Shabbat next week. So, but those are really important things that you needed to hear about. So, thank you.
Our thoughts now turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and life and the meaning of loss and death. Tonight we remember Stephen Lewis, grandfather of Amy Horman, Aaron Simon, grandfather of Jessica Main, Branya Weiss, grandmother of Steve Weiss, Dorothy Russell, Fred Russell's mother, Lillian Levine, Rick Moss's aunt, Philip Finkel, Linda Pryor's uncle, Baruch Margalit, my friend, and father of Nachshon Margalit, Susanna De Silva, sister of Rita Becker, Sandy Boxer, of blessed memory, Philip Trevor, Sophie Carsel, mother of Richard and John, Leonard Marks, father of Mary Bianco, Betty Mandelbaum of blessed memory, and Sarah Goldie, mother of Regina Craig. And we take into our hearts all those who have no one to say Kaddish for them. Do you want to light the candle?
Do I want to light the candle?
Would you do?
Sure.
Okay. I'd like to then call on Mary to light the Yortzeit candle.
I'd like you to light it with me. Yes?
Yes, sure.
Okay. I don't
Okay.
trust myself with fire.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Please join me in the Kaddish on page 294. And stand if you're able. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabah, v'alma divra chirusei v'yamelich malchusei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chaye dechol Beit Yisrael, b'agala v'zman kori v'yamru amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya, v'im kol choso aleinu v'shirata, v'shirasa, Yiskadal. Somebody keep going. I'm losing it. I'm sorry. Le'elam and kol berchasa b'shirasa, tush b'chasa v'ne'amasa, damiran v'yama v'yamru amen. Yehesh lama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamru amen. Oseh shalom b'mramav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yamaru amen. And please sit down. You know, for the 100,000th time I've said the Kaddish. You can't control this, can you? You just can't control it. Let's conclude with the singing of Adon Olam. And Cindy, if we can do the old beer hole melody, that would be the one I would like. Okay. Oh, 321. Share 321. Tearing kol yitzib nerom lies naso azay melech shemo nikra Adon Olam v'yahare kiklot hakol v'hado yimloch nora Adon Olam v'ein sheni v'hi hohi v'hi yeviti fora Adon Olam Asher Malach, B'ter Kol, Yitzir Nivrak, Es Nasab, Zakol, Azayin Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, V'hu Echad, V'ein Sheni, L'ham Shilo L'chabira Adon Olam, B'li Reshit, B'li Tachlit, V'li hoz v'ham Yisra Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'ter Kol Yitzir Nivrach, Leis Naso v'hepsa kol, Zayin Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, V'hu Eli v'hai go'ali, V'tzur li b'yesara Adon Olam, V'hu nisi omanos li, Manas kosi b'yom hikra Adon Olam, Asher Malach, B'ter Kol Yitzir Nivrach, Lis Naso v'hepsa kol, Azayin Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam, B'yado apkiruhi, Adon Olam, V'imruchi gaviyati, Adonai li v'lo ira Adon Olam, Asher Malach, Yitzir Nivrach, Leis Naso, perhaps a call as ein Melech Shemon Yikra Don Olam. Now I'll leave you with the threefold blessing of the Torah. Yivarechacha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless you and protect you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yihumecha. May God shine his face upon you and be gracious unto you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yashem lecha shalom. May God lift his face toward you and give you peace. And let us say, Amen. And good Shabbos.